Good call on McDonald's for lunch.
Yeah, let's eat.
Okay, we have the oh yeah for me.
Can you hand me my
Yep, and here are a couple of woot-woots to share.
I love my woohoo!
Oh, sounds like Stacy went to McDonald's too.
For a limited time, grab a hot and spicy McChicken and small fries for just $3 at McDonald's. Price and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with combo meal.
Hello, listeners of the Mad Scientist Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Cogswell, here with my co-host, Marie Mayhew. Marie.
You know what I've been watching lately? I'm just going to jump into some tangent really quickly. That's really excellent, and everybody should be watching it.
What?
The Mandalorian.
Yeah, I heard it's really good. I can't wait to start.
You need to be watching
Baby Yoda.
it. Nope.
Cute.
No. So yes. I wasn't even going to say anything about the super cute character. I was going to say it's a space Western. It's really, really good.
Right.
If you like Westerns, like I'm a big fan of like spaghetti Westerns. You may not know this about me. Huge fan of the Western.
I didn't know that.
Huge fan of the Western.
Weird.
Oh yeah. Spaghetti Westerns, The Searchers, Shane, some of the Clint Eastwoods.
Interesting.
Especially
Okay.
the spaghetti Westerns, Man with No Name. And so to see them put, and that's basically what Firefly was a space Western. And this is very much sort of in the genre of the Man with No Name, spaghetti Western, and it's shot very much like a Western, all the way up to the unveiling of Baby Yoda, and then everything just goes like berserk, and it is just like, oh my god, the cutest thing on the face of the planet. It is like they have just shot the entire viewing audience with, like, I don't know, some sort of drug that has just incapacitated the entire world.
Some kind of cuteness ray that has ruined our civilization.
It's ruining our civilization, man. And there's no merch. There's no merch out yet. These
Not yet.
bastards. What are they doing?
Give them
it's
time.
like, oh yeah, you know what? There's no merch. They're gonna, and you know, they're just gonna blanket that stuff for Christmas. It's just gonna be just like, it's gonna be like the Purge to get, you know,
The Purge. Oh,
Baby
God.
Yoda.
Give me the Baby Yoda. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Well, you know what, Marie? You know what I think I'm going to get myself for Christmas this year?
What are you getting yourself for Christmas this year? The holiday after, 2 holidays after the only holiday that really matters.
Seriously,
Halloween.
I know.
Go ahead.
Seriously, yeah. I am going to get myself not paying attention to UFO stuff for like an entire year, I think. I'm so excited, Marie. I'm so excited. We'll still do episodes on them.
You're going to turn a blind eye.
I'm so excited.
You're going to turn a blind eye to your bête noire? Are you telling me that? How could that be true? That can't be true.
Nothing ever
The
happens.
audience knows better.
It's so
You say this, and then you're going to be like, and another thing that makes no sense. You know, no, just teasing. Why are you doing this, Chris? It seems like, I don't know. It seems like the beginning of a Christmas Carol.
No, so I'm going to do it. I think I'm going to do it both because we want to get on the show here back into some more kind of, you know, just other topics. You know, we've done a huge amount of, this Bigelow series has been intense, and this is the final episode in that series, but it also is,
Yes.
you know, it also is kind of the ending of a, it kind of lays out, I think, the fundamental reasoning behind my thinking, at least, and I think in many ways your thinking too, on the whole AATIP to the Stars Academy Bigelow thing. So,
And they haven't found anything as cute as Baby Yoda, so you know what?
No.
F them.
No, they haven't found anything as cute as Baby Yoda, so whatever, right? And with that, Jake, roll the tape. So, Marie, last episode we ended on the creation of AATIP.
Yes, the government funding cloaking
Something.
and wormholes.
Yeah. Some ridiculous, crazy stuff, right? Some ridiculous, some not ridiculous, right? Let's be clear on that to start with. So
Yes,
Elizondo joins AATIP in 2008, and then he will AATIP quickly overcomes AAWSAP, AAWSAP. The worst acronyms in the world. as the two of the major related groups, right? So initially AATIP is a smaller part of the AAWSAP, family of groups, I guess. And then AATIP quickly becomes the one that's the most legitimate. And the person who actually the person who runs the overall project initially, Dr. James Lakatsky, will actually end up ultimately saying that this whole project ruined his career. And basically, caused him to not really have a place in kind of the world
scientific community.
Yeah, well, just in the world of what's the word? I don't know. Yeah, I guess the scientific community. I don't really know, right? But it's interesting, anyways. So, all right. What ends up happening then? And the reason that this happens supposedly is because so Elizondo says that this whole thing, he eventually will come out and say that this whole thing started to be viewed in the minds of some of the higher ups that this was related to kind of demons or anti-Judeo-Christian belief systems, right? Which, I mean, frankly, if there's one thing that this series has kind of, I think, pointed out, it's that there is this kind of weird pseudo-mystical, non-Judeo-Christian fringe. Not really, I don't know. There's that has been part of the kind of, I think, American upper echelon culture since the 60s and 50s.
Well, yeah, if you're getting your funding from the federal government and from Congress, if that's where your budget is being derived from, spoiler alert, the majority of them are Judeo-Christian and have very traditional values when it comes to looking at that stuff.
Yeah, so it's kind of, I think it's part of one of the overall mysteries of this whole thing is how did non kind of traditional Judeo-Christian style belief systems get such a foothold in the military? And I think a lot of that has to do with Stubblebean and, his openness to those kinds of ideas, and also, frankly, to just the weirdness of the 60s and 70s. But
well, yeah, and they wanted some sort of weapon, whatever it would take to get a weapon that would beat communism.
Yeah,
right. That would be global dominance. It doesn't matter where it comes from. It's like I'm sure that they would look into anything if they thought like, hey, this would beat the Ruskies.
Right. And so
at a certain point,
what Elizondo says is, quote, UAP has even been associated with demons and anti-Judeo-Christian beliefs. I experienced this firsthand during my time working at the U.S. government's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, AATIP, where certain senior government officials thought our collection of facts on unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP, was dangerous to their philosophical beliefs. In fact, my AATIP predecessor's career was ruined because of misplaced fears by an elite few. Rather than accept the data as provided by a top-rank rocket scientist, they decided the data was a threat to their belief system and instead destroyed his career because of it, end quote. We don't really have a lot of other we don't really have a lot of other
corroborations. Yes.
We don't really have a lot of other corroboration for that,
yeah.
But it is interesting that he says this. So
yeah, I have a quick question about that. So when he said that these people destroyed his career, this wasn't a really widely circulated initiative, was it? I mean, if you look at sort of the list of their the list of things that they were working on and who it was put out to, it's like a handful or a small group, like 2 subcommittees, and then I think the Gang of 8, pretty much. Right?
Yeah, it was not a huge amount of people who knew about this, and really, I think in the way that it seems like it was discussed or talked about, it was more. I mean, look at the things that we know they were working on. Some of this stuff is not as ridiculous as others. You know what I mean? And I mean, none of it is really ultimately ridiculous, right? They did a very good job of pushing it forward in such a way that made it seem, legitimate enough that this was going to be funded. However, some of the stuff, right? Transversal wormholes, stargates, and negative energy by Davis. That's probably not really a thing. Biosensors. That's probably another one that maybe kind of, but. The biosensors thing, it's funny, actually. I have a friend who, as part of his master's degree for electrical engineering, did a project on trying to study or measure the body's biofield. right? And of course, there's nothing to it. I mean, this professor, though, was like, oh, I want to test it. There's this book that says this. It'd be really interesting, whatever. And they found nothing. And then I think his ultimate...
Like biorhythms?
Kind of.
That big thing from the 60s?
I think more like it was weird. It was like
Groovy.
It was like you'd be on a bed and then they'd measure your electromagnetic, the field around you as you slept, and saw if they could induce, like, if you had a dream... that kind of stuff, right? It was very strange. It was a very strange project, and it went nowhere for a whole year. And then finally, he told his advisor, like, listen, I need to get something I can actually write a thesis on. And so we need to do something here. And then I think he ended up doing a thing on, like, time, measuring a clock or an atomic clock or something. But anyways, whatever. So yeah, it's not a huge amount of people that know about this project. So Bigelow, though, again, is kind of the main player here in terms of a corporate liaison or a corporation that has part of this. And in 2009, he again dips his toe into the kind of MUFON milieu with what is known as the STAR Team. And so this is a quote from the STAR Team website from MUFON. It says, "STAR Team Impact Project, a bold and aggressive step forward in tracking the alien presence among us." At the time, the MUFON director is James Carrion, and he says in his director's message, kind of a director's message goes out with every one of the journals. He says that it's going to be a subcontract where MUFON is being paid by Bigelow Aerospace, Advanced Aerospace Space Studies, and Space Studies, BAASS, again. BAASS, BAASS.
BAASS.
Terrible acronyms.
BAASS.
What's going on, UFO field? It says, quote...
It's like you can't even come up with... MUFON, too, is sort of like...
Terrible. Absolutely terrible.
So it's not good.
So Carrion says, quote, MUFON has been subcontracted to provide rapid response UFO investigation services to Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies and has initiated the STAR Team Impact Project to provide these services. BAASS will pay for laboratory testing of physical evidence collected. Essentially, what it is Bigelow is paying MUFON investigators, paying for their investigations, for them to go out into the field. They're given materials. They're given, slight training, again, kind of from the MUFON training normally. But they're given collection kits. They're given access to laboratories that Bigelow works with or owns to test materials. They're given flights, right? They can fly out when a supposed crash happens, everything else.
Yeah.
They're
basically just given deep pockets.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, that's...
Yeah. And so some of them...
Keep taking their money.
Some of the most...
Just keep taking his money.
Yeah, some of the most important MUFON members at the time are part of this group, including Steve Hudgens, Debbie Ziegelmeyer, Chase Klotsky, and others who you've probably heard of or seen on TV and things. But, they kind of... The MUFON world is funny because it's kind of always the same players that kind of rise and fall, and then rise and fall, and then rise and fall. But very quickly, the STAR Team falls into disrepute, and they start having arguments with Bigelow about who owns the cases, who owns the materials.
What?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Weird. That's so weird. And so...
Can I just intervene very quickly? Because I think the one thing that Bigelow also does spend money on and does not have a problem spending money on is like legal counsel. Right? Which I don't think, I'm sure the retainer of his legal team is a deep bench with a lot of people and a lot of time and a lot of resources.
Certainly deeper than MUFON.
MUFON, from what we have seen in their disclosed, annual reports of their finances, really, they don't have, if you're going to get into this sort of dispute, first of all, if you take the money, it's his stuff.
Yeah.
It's just, anyways. So it just kind of cracks me up that they're like, well, and now we're going to have a dispute about this. And I'm like, oh man, you guys can't afford to buy the suit to show up to court to go after this stuff. Why would you think it's a good idea to even? All right, sorry.
No, it's fine. It's a huge thing, right? It's hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
but by all means, keep taking their money. In another 3 years, they'll do it again.
Yeah, exactly. They're gonna, so what ends up happening is some of the MUFON membership becomes very, again, because of the Carpenter affair, that's still kind of fresh in people's minds, you know? And the people that are part of MUFON, there's not like a huge turnover for members. A lot of the people that have stuck with MUFON through the years have stuck with them through, you know, thick and thin. These are people who, you know, went through the Carpenter affair and went through the changes in leadership and went through the hoaxes and the, you know, all the things that MUFON has been involved with that have ended up not being, just whatever, right? Just these are people that have been there for a long time. They've been there for the good and the bad. And for a lot of them, this Star Team thing is just another aspect of kind of, you know, well, the leadership of MUFON does its own thing, but the local chapters are completely almost separate entities, you know? They share the name, they send dues because they're all members, and they use MUFON's kind of case management system internally to track their cases and things. But for all intents and purposes, MUFON operates, you know, as individual separate entities. Yeah, as little fiefdoms. Yeah, exactly. So part of the issue that people have with this is that they believe that MUFON may actually be, or rather that Bigelow may be hiding cases and materials and other information from MUFON members with the Star Team. That he may be collecting this
cherry
stuff.
picking?
Well, yeah, cherry picking what cases he keeps, what cases he allows to become public, taking supposed crashed UFO materials, things like that, right? There are still rumors, you know, floating around the MUFON world that this was all some kind of big cover-up operation. So it's interesting. But so by January 2010, supposedly they're no longer sending Bigelow samples anymore. But, you know, who the hell knows? So in 2010 now, so that's 2009. In 2010, the project that was known as AAWSAP, AAWSAP, ends. And AATIP officially becomes the new de facto group. Those contracts that Bigelow was working under that he bid for end. And Elizondo states that he will move the program to the Office of the Secretary of Defense, or OSD. At that point, officially, the project will kind of go under and continue until 2012 when it supposedly ends. Although Elizondo says that it keeps going, it just changes names and it gets moved someplace else. 2010
goes off book.
Right. 2010 is also another important year because it is the year that a Christopher J. Marks will claim that he begins working on Skinwalker Ranch and that he's working there for Bigelow Aerospace. Now, we said in the last episode that when the NIDS team ended, technically research on the ranch ended as well. However, the people that were on the ranch doing the actual investigations and things, those were never really NIDS members. They weren't on that scientific advisory board. They weren't the public face of NIDS. They were people actually
interns.
Yeah, I mean, they were kind of like security guards, you know, with video cameras.
Yeah.
And in some cases, not even with really video cameras. Now, Marx's claims,
cell phones.
Marx's claim come to us because of his interviews and things on the show UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, which you should definitely check out. These are really interesting interviews. Mr. Marx has now gone on to other shows and things too to give his interviews, but it's very interesting, right? He later, this will eventually lead to other people coming out, people that also worked with him. One of his teammates supposedly will come out and say, the teammate's name is also Christopher, but it's Christopher Bartell. And
they're clones.
Well, what's interesting is, and they're clones. What's interesting is
cloning interns and giving them cell phones.
What's interesting is that these aren't just people coming out and saying these things and they're, it's crackpots or whatever. They have documentation to prove that they were on the ranch. They have their signed contracts with Bigelow. They have forms they signed. They have their logs and things. If this is a hoax, it is a tremendous hoax. And, I just don't think that that's the truth is stupid enough. The truth is stupid enough that we don't need a hoax in this case. And yeah, so this is kind of now a new era here where Bigelow Aerospace is taking over on the ranch. And so with that, we're going to have a quick word from our sponsors.
This season, all your favorites have one home for the holidays. Yours with Disney Plus.
Merry Christmas!
Moana, Woody, Buzz, Captain Marvel, Darth Vader, and Homer will all be there, so make room. Make Disney Plus your home for the holidays, streaming Disney, Pixar, Marvel, Star Wars, Nat Geo, and 30 seasons of The Simpsons. That's something to celebrate.
Merry Christmas to you!
All these and more now streaming. Go to DisneyPlus.com to sign up now.
Good call on McDonald's for lunch.
Yeah, let's eat.
Okay, we have the oh yeah for me.
Can you hand me my
Yep, and here are a couple of woot-woots to share.
I love my woohoo!
Oh, sounds like Stacy went to McDonald's too.
For a limited time, grab a hot and spicy McChicken and small fries for just $3 at McDonald's. Price and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with combo meal.
And we're back. All right, so Christopher Bartel and Christopher Marks come forward. They claim that they initially were bound by an NDA. However, since the ranch was sold, he doesn't feel like he is bound by that NDA anymore. And so he's not really worried about it. Which, I mean, I don't know. Maybe, right? Who knows?
Yeah.
He will claim
That's curious.
that he will claim that the main reason he is going to come forward is because of the documentary Hunt for the Skinwalker by Jeremy Corbell, which he will claim which he claims is a misrepresentation and overall an attempt at commercializing the ranch that he is not comfortable being part of or having any, seeing happen essentially.
What?
You mean to tell me that wasn't a factually based, hard-hitting documentary?
First of all, I thought it was a Frontline documentary. It was just missing the voice, the Frontline voice for Hunt for the Skinwalker. I think, okay, so when I started to watch this, I was texting Cogs because he was about asleep at that point. And I think I got like maybe 10 minutes into it and I had to turn it off because I was just constantly texting it. Like, it was the most, like, I can't even, so we see more of George Knapp's Rec Room than anything else in the entire series.
Yeah.
Like, why are you shooting, like, if, like, again, like, I know that this is gritty, this cinema verite of going in and finding this stuff out, and they're showing it, and they're showing him, and then they're showing, like, all the video cassettes and all this stuff. And there's his rec room with his, like, kind of, early 80s art and ceiling fan and popcorn ceiling. And you're like, man, this is a bit much. This is just much. I still have to listen to I still have to do the rest of it. I was like, just snippets at a time.
Yeah. So full disclosure. So this Jeremy Corbell is the guy that did the Bob Lazar documentary too, and has kind of been on the Bob Lazar, recreation of his, I guess sounded like public image tour, basically. Corbell and
what was his other claim to fame? There was something else that was good.
Corbell's other claim to fame?
Yeah. What was that?
Oh my God. It's quantum jujitsu, a type of martial art, that he has supposedly developed. I don't know what quantum jujitsu is. I hesitate to find out. I don't care. It seems very unimportant, but just
not to this little black duck. It doesn't.
Anyways,
that's an entire episode is quantum jujitsu.
All right. So Marks will say,
imagine the dojo that is quantum jiu-jitsu.
Marks will say, damn it, Marie. Marks and others will say, it's okay. Marks and others will say that Marks claims to have worked on the ranch from 2010 to 2016. What he will say is that during his time on the ranch, there were no serious tests of any kind done on the ranch itself. No tests for ghosts or goblins or ghouls or
anomalies.
UFOs or aliens or skinwalkers or anything.
Orbs. No orbs.
He says that they did give them some materials. They gave them cameras, EMF detectors, thermal imaging gear, whatever, but that it's all in such bad condition and it's so outdated that he actually ends up buying some of their own equipment on the team. But what he will say is that the only thing that was consistently tested on the ranch were the workers on the ranch themselves. So he will claim that when he first recruited, he was required to sign a documentation, and he has the documentation, but he was required to sign something that said that he would undergo periodic medical testing, including things like, an ECG, blood and urine analysis, EKGs, all that kind of stuff.
So,
he
quick
says,
question.
Go ahead.
Why do you think? What are they testing for? What are they looking for?
So I have a couple of different ideas in this. One of which we're going to get into more seriously here. But
okay. All right.
the less conspiratorial theory, or the more what's the word? The more benign explanation, I guess, or the less kind of crazy explanation would be that they just want to make sure that anyone who's on the ranch, if they have a sighting, people can't go and say, oh, they were drunk or they were high or they had some kind of, they had epilepsy or something that would cause them to have a seizure or they were hallucinating or whatever. I think that that's one way of looking at this, that they just wanted to make sure that everyone on the ranch was healthy enough. Health. Exactly. Was healthy enough to be a good witness. On the other hand, though, what will come out? So this is from a report on 8 News Now in Las Vegas. This is the home of George Knapp. This is the station that he works for. So, quote, this is from 2018, quote, BAASS broke new ground in professionalism by hiring, training, and deploying 50 full-time staff comprising retired military intelligence and law enforcement officers, PhD-level scientists, engineers, technicians, analysts, translators, and project managers to create the largest multidisciplinary full-time team in history to investigate the UFO topic. The investigation by BAASS provided new lines of evidence showing that the UFO phenomena was a lot more than nuts and bolts machines that interacted with military aircraft. The phenomenon also involved a whole panoply of diverse activity that included bizarre creatures, poltergeist activity, invisible entities, orbs of light, animal and human injuries, and much more. The exclusive focus on nuts and bolts machines could be considered myopic and unproductive in solving the larger mystery of UFOs. One of the major
factually based, but whatever, that's cool too.
One of the major successes of BAASS was in adopting the novel approach of utilizing the human body as a readout system for dissecting interactions with the UFO phenomena. This novel approach aimed to circumvent the increased evidence of deception and subterfuge by the UFO phenomena, and that multiple eyewitnesses co-located in the same vicinity frequently reported seeing wildly different events. The evidence was multiplying that the UFO phenomena was capable of manipulating and distorting human perception, and therefore eyewitness testimony of UFO activity was becoming increasingly untrustworthy. The BAASS approach was to view the human body as a readout system for UFO effects by utilizing forensic technology, the tools of immunology, cell biology, genomics, and neuroanatomy for in-depth study of the effects of UFOs on humans. This approach marked a dramatic shift away from the traditional norms of relying on eyewitness testimony as the central evidentiary arm in UFO investigations. The approach aimed to bypass UFO deception and manipulation of human perception by utilizing molecular forensics to decipher the biological consequences of the phenomena. The result of applying this new approach was a revolution in delineating the threat levels of UFOs. End quote.
What? Can I call bullshit on all of this? I'm sorry.
So here's the thing. This is a statement from a senior manager of BAASS, is what it said. It's posted by staff on the 8 News Now news page, May 4th, 2018. It's updated May 9th, 2018. Here's the thing.
Yeah.
That is someone...
Just one thing? Yeah, sorry.
This seems to suggest that after testing the ranch itself stopped working, they instead decided to start studying the people who were on the ranch every day. This would be a comical breach of ethics that they are performing tests on human subjects in the desert on this ranch in some weird way.
Well, even so even if they had their, even if it wasn't a breach of ethics, it's not even based in reality. Right? I mean, first of all, you can't take a bunch of people and just test the few things that they said that they were testing them for, which would be, right, EKG, your urine, your blood, and test for all of this other stuff that they're talking about. Especially not over without any type of baseline, without any type of medical history, without any type of ongoing like control group.
Well, also that the people on the ranch don't seem to have known that they were being studied. Like, obviously, when you do a human trial
Right.
of something,
Right.
the people have to give
Consent.
give kind of active consent, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Because otherwise,
It's their medical records.
yeah, otherwise there's no way. First off, there's no way of. I mean, there's no way of ethically doing the test itself, but then there's also the problem of what do these people think is happening then, right? Like if, and here's the other part of this too, right? So Erica Lukes and others will now claim that this is actually evidence that perhaps what Bigelow Aerospace was really testing in the desert there wasn't even the occupants themselves. It was the occupants' responses to non-lethal weaponry.
Well, yeah.
Now,
I mean,
there's no
it could be one thing, but
there's no as far as we can report on this in this episode, right, in this series,
Right.
that's a theory, right?
That's a theory. Well,
That's a theory. However,
yeah.
it would the very fact of them doing this kind of testing in this way is in its own way, I think, ethically problematic, and I think also quite pretty damn crazy that to think that this guy,
Yeah.
A guy who 20 years ago was just selling hotels is suddenly taking people's blood and urine to test it for, I mean, who God knows what,
Well, so what were so really quickly, what were they gathering from the subjects again? They were gathering an EKG, which is
It was
basically
blood, urine, EKG, ECG, and
So ECG is what? ECG is
encephalogram. I think it's like a brain test.
Okay. So, but it's not, again, like kind
No.
of not,
Sorry. Nope.
No, yeah, I was going to say.
ECG is just the same thing as an EKG. It's an electrocardiogram.
Electrocardiogram. So
yeah, but
they're
here's the thing,
monitoring
right?
the heart.
They'll claim that other tests were done though too, right? Like CT scans and whatever. They'll say that they were MRI, they had CT scans done, they had et cetera, right? But I mean,
None of these things would track anything that they're talking about, though.
Well, the thing is that they are operating under the assumption that if we go back to Scientology, they are operating under the assumption that your body's electrical field can be used to manipulate or be manipulated by the forces around you. So they are operating on this theory that this is the way that psychokinetics or psychic powers or whatever happen. And so maybe this is a psychic phenomena, but there still has to be an underlying physical reason, I think, that they would argue or they would think for how this would happen, like mechanically how it would actually happen.
Right, but none of the stuff that they're doing would show any of that or could prove any of that with any, even subjectively. Right? I mean, because basically you could argue, like, let's say it's the same thing in arguing with the Cuban sonic attack, right? That they said that they had an event and it caused this brain damage, quote unquote, brain damage in certain individuals. But what they couldn't track is what the base was when they started any of those events to begin with, right?
Yeah,
like they couldn't say that those people didn't have something or didn't have a pre-existing condition that would have, or that, again, the parameters of their tests weren't. Sorry, go ahead.
But in this case, these are people that are living in a closed-off environment that is controlled in some way, and they have a baseline of this is what their results looked like every period of time where nothing weird happened, and then the day after a weird event, this is what the results looked like. Do you know what I mean? So I think as opposed to say the sonic attack, if they did see something, if they did notice something, I don't know what they would see. Maybe they would look, I don't know, maybe they would look like in the blood for, an increase in like radioactive, I don't know, tracers of like radiation damage or something. Like, honestly, I don't know, but I don't think it matters. I think it's neither here nor there. Who cares what they were testing for? Should they have been testing in the first place?
Well,
you know what I mean?
No, I
These
agree.
are people who were shooting psychic bullets at goats. Who the hell know? Like, who knows? Who knows what they were searching for? I don't think it matters at all what they were searching for. I think what matters is that there are these people who were tested on without their consent or knowledge necessarily. Of course, yeah, they signed the form to get it done or whatever, but still, that's not the same thing as consent.
Right. No, I agree. Both are grievous. I'm just saying, even if they had consent, there's no science to this. Like, you can't even argue that it's for the greater good of understanding something, because they would have gotten these results, and they would have been factually even evident of anything.
Yes,
I mean, it was a violation of PHI, but it was also complete BS.
Right.
Oh.
So
now we're all worked up.
So that's happening at the ranch, right? While this is happening in 2013, Bigelow receives a $17.8 million deal with NASA to place one of his, he calls them beams, Bigelow Expandable Activity Module. He wants to place one on the ISS, and it's actually given, it's on the ISS. It's given a mission extension in 2017. The idea about all of this is that he will charge space tourists money to go into space. His stated goal is a privately owned space station by 2023. Currently, then, what happens, or I guess sort of what happens, right? I mean, that's basically where we are right now,
Yep.
In 2015, DeLong will start To the Stars Academy. It will eventually include Luis Elizondo, who will leave AATIP in 2017 to join To the Stars Academy. It will also include Hal Puthoff, Jim Semivan, and Steve Justice. Semivan is said to have had a UFO experience of his own. Supposedly him and his wife were abducted. Steve Justice is the former head of the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works. We don't really know how all these players come together in some cases, right? I mean, for most of them, it's easy, right? How Elizondo fits in with Bigelow. And so here's the other thing too. People will claim that Bigelow has nothing to do with To the Stars Academy, but think about everything we have learned so far in this series, right? All of these names are tied directly to Bigelow in their search for UFO information, right? Puthoff is essentially essentially on retainer with Bob Bigelow as his scientist. He's made his career after transitioning back over to kind of aerospace-ish stuff and psychic stuff, whatever, in the 80s and 90s, right? The person he glommed onto was Bigelow, and Bigelow has essentially had Puthoff on all of his major projects since then. Justice, I think it would make sense for him and Bigelow to know each other, because we know in that letter that Bigelow wrote to Edgar Mitchell that they were testing a piece of UFO debris at the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works. If Justice was the head of the Skunk Works at that time, then the person that Bigelow would have been in contact with, or at least someone who would have known of Bigelow's existence, would have had to have been Steve Justice. So that would make sense there, right? Elizondo worked for a government program where Bigelow was the only bidder and was the major outside contractor. So every one of these people essentially has been working there. The only ones that appear to be non-Bigelow people are DeLong and Semivan. Now, there are rumors, none really documented or anything else, that Semivan has been part of this UFO field since their experience, whatever you want to call it, occurred to them. And so Semivan has supposedly kind of been flitting around this field for some time. Similar things will be said about Steve Justice as well. But I don't think, Justice's connection, I think, is clear, or at least more sensible, potentially. DeLong, however, will say early on in his research that he met with an aerospace mogul, essentially. And through WikiLeaks, we know that he was meeting with other government officials about this stuff. He was talking to government officials at the time that Bigelow was the only contractor working on these projects. So it would make, again, perfect sense. And we know now that Bigelow and DeLong have met. There's pictures of them on Instagram. There's, whatever, right?
Right.
And so Semivan actually will say in the intro to the Secret Machines book, part 1, right, he'll say, quote, "As for my formal introduction to the phenomena, as we know it in today's context, it came suddenly and unexpectedly. I will not attempt to go into the experience here, but I will say that it was one of life's game changers for both my wife and me. The experience was simultaneously frightening, perplexing, frustrating, and absurd. It was also both physical and emotional, although I am undecided as to whether there was any spiritual addendum. Almost 30 years later, I am still not sure what to make of the experience. What I do know, however, is that this event changed my view of what constitutes our collective version of reality." End quote. So that's basically where things are now, right? To the Stars Academy has kind of continued that relationship with the government that Bigelow started with the Bigelow Aerospace AATIP AAWSAP program thing. They have a CRADA, which is a combined research agreement or a defense agreement or something like that. Combined stands for, again, terrible acronyms. All the good ones are taken.
Acronyms.
All the acronyms are taken.
Well,
Stop trying to do acronyms, people.
I know.
But anyways,
Come up with code names. Well, I mean, basically the other thing too is it's where the money is. Bigelow is where the money is. If you want money, or if you have any kind of foray into this, you're going to come into his periphery.
Yeah,
and he is going to put money at you. It just seems like to me, it's like that's the crack, right? That everybody gets hooked on. If you want to go into this funding, but it's expensive. Like there's equipment, there's capital investment, you're going to have to commit yourself to it, and you're also excluding yourself from a lot of other work, like we were seeing with the other scientists. It's like you may not go back to a job at a university necessarily. So it's sort of like you have to be able to figure out a way to fund the program and, make sure that you're putting, food on your table type of thing. And the person who does that is Bigelow. He's the money.
I think what's fascinating about all of this is you have this guy, Bigelow, this figure who has been, on the one hand, exceptionally successful in some of his ventures. The hotel business and the kind of the tourist business, the space business, literally the aerospace business, getting out into space. And then you have, on the other hand, his kind of continued efforts with a group who, from the outside, appear to have provided no return on investment for this man
that we know of.
And the people that have provided return on investment, such as John Alexander, who, created a statistical survey result, right? Actually gathered data and did things, whatever, eventually seemed to stop working for him. So it's such a weird part of the story that, again, from the outside, it appears that none of this has worked. None of this has led to anything, but he keeps getting money to study this stuff. So what if, right? What if it's actually worked? What if he's actually, I don't know.
That's exactly it. That's what I keep coming back to.
Yeah, like how much.
But he definitely has something. He definitely knows something that we don't.
One has to wonder how willing is the government to throw money at something that doesn't work just because of blatant corruption. I don't think you can make the case that Bigelow getting the contract for AATIP, AAWSAP, whatever you want to call it, I don't think you can make the case that wasn't corruption. That wasn't just like blatant corruption of Reed getting his buddy a sweet government contract to study something they're both kind of interested in.
Agreed.
I think that is blatant corruption. I think that there is also a good deal of a history there of this group making or getting money from the government to study these odd things or these kind of extreme phenomena or whatever, and then there being really no comeuppance. Like there seems to be no, it seems to be government at its worst. There seems to be no punishment for failure, right? You just keep failing upwards. It's like you just keep being in it and you just keep getting higher and higher pay and more position. But I don't really think that that's how things, if that's the way things work, that's very depressing.
Well, I mean, I look at it two separate things. Like, I think that Bigelow would be doing it with or without the government and their money. Because really, if you look at it, they haven't given him a huge amount of money.
Oh,
They've given him a good chunk of money, but not a lot. Not a lot. But I don't know what he has acquired or what knowledge he has now. I think that that's like almost, to me, even the bigger question, or the more interesting question is, he just keeps at it. Like, he's much more, it seems like after this whole thing with Skinwalker, he's much quieter with this in some ways, or it became much more public. His involvement was much more public, but I would assume he's still out there and he's still acquiring, he's still going, full speed.
Well, so
with everything, right?
At this point, we're kind of left with two potential converging or diverging theories. There is, on the one hand, maybe this is just a story of corruption. This is just a group of people.
This
is just a group of people who have been able to, by hook or by crook, get funding for their kind of pet projects and are just really good at that part of this. They're really good at kind of, they've just been in the right place at the right time. And maybe this is just a weird kind of a weird part of science. This is just like a weird story. And there's stories like this in throughout the history of the sciences, in the Soviet Union, we talked about Lamarck and Lamarckian genetics, right? Another kind of field where it was based on faulty science, but it just kept happening because people wanted to believe it. It fit in with the time period.
Yep.
On the other hand, maybe Bigelow kept knocking at the door and finally someone let him in.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Like, again, like, I'm not, to me, the least interesting part of this is the involvement with government. Like, it just makes sense that he would acquire that as much as he would acquire any privately held industry, right? Like, anything
sure.
that touches this, or that he can get his hooks into to understand how much they know and who knows what within that group. Like, he's an acquirer. He's collected all of this stuff. And out of everything that he's collected, there's got to be something that it keeps propelling him to do it. Because if he came up dry every single time, you would think, I mean, the man is now in his, I want to say 70s or 80s.
Yeah, he's up there.
He'd probably be like, you know what? I'm done spending money on this. I am now going to take all my money out and put it into horticulture, or whatever. But he's not. He's putting X amount into the space program and for space tourists, which to me is a very legitimate front. But at the same time, he's still associated with all this stuff. So I think he does not make poor investments.
But then you know what, Marie? Look at Michael Bloomberg. Right? Another billionaire who has spent money on a ridiculous fantasy for decades. Agreed. And with that, listeners, we will end this series on Robert Bigelow. We are so happy you stuck with us throughout this entire series here. We are finally done with Robert Bigelow.
So he can officially, take the satellite out of orbit. We do not need to be monitored anymore.
Right. We're done. You can get the black vans out of the hallways.
We didn't get anything more. We didn't get out of get them out of our cul-de-sacs, man. You're making the neighbors nervous.
Maybe, and actually it's funny too. I wanted to touch on one thing before we end here. Maybe the least mysterious part of all this is who owns Skinwalker Ranch now. We didn't get into it because frankly it's like a Google search away. It's just not, it doesn't seem to be
that
important.
Should be for Patreons. That should be our Patreon.
All right, we'll do a Patreon one on maybe who owns the ranch now. We'll see. Anyways, dear listeners, we love you so much. Thank you for listening. Happy Thanksgiving.
Quantum Jiu-jitsu!
This is going to release after Thanksgiving, I think. So I hope you had a good Thanksgiving. And we'll be back next week with another episode.
Bye!
Thank you again, dear listeners, for listening to the Mad Scientist podcast. I have been your host, Chris Cogswell, joined by my co-host,
Marie Mayhew.
If you'd like to contact the show, please send us an email at themadscientistpodcast@gmail.com. That's all one word. You can also follow us on Twitter at MadScientistPod or at Team Giant Squid for Marie. And of course, you can see us on Facebook, on Instagram, and all over the internet as the Mad Scientist Podcast. And again, our logo is the one with the pumpkin head, so it's easy to see.
Mm-hmm.
If you've enjoyed the show tonight, please consider supporting us on Patreon, where the money that you give to us will help us to promote this show further, to make it better, and just to spend more time making it.
Because we love doing that.
We do love doing that. Our logo was designed by Carrie Shaheen. Our web design is done by Desdemona Howard.
Woohoo!
And our sound design is done by Jake Cardinal. Thanks again for listening.
Thank you. This has been a Damn It Chippy production.
At Metro, the best deal in wireless is on. Switch to Metro and get 1 full Amazon Prime membership included every month. Plus, get 2 free phones from top brands like Samsung and LG with huge HD screens. All with 2 lines for just $90. That's the best deal in wireless, only at Metro. Plus sales tax and activation fee. Requires port in of eligible number not currently active on T-Mobile network or active on Metro in past 90 days. Limit 4 per account or household. Offer subject to change. Offer valid for new Amazon Prime members. Amazon Prime has a $12.99 per month value. Restrictions apply. See store for details and terms and conditions.
Hi, it's Jamie, Progressive's Employee of the Month, 2 months in a row. Leave a message at the... Hi, Jamie. It's me, Jamie. I just had a new idea for our song about the Name Your Price tool. So when it's like, tell us what you want to pay, hey, 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 and the trombone goes, blah, 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 and you say, we'll help you find coverage options to fit your budget. Then we just all do finger snaps while a choir goes, savings coming at ya, savings coming at ya. Yes? No? Maybe? Anyway, see your practice tonight. I got new lyrics for the rap break.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.